Hey guys, welcome back to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we are back with the patch 5.3a rundown. So quite a number of champion changes as well as item changes and just a lot of changes. And this one is a pretty big patch considering it is a patch, but let's jump straight into it. Let's not waste any time. So first up we have Ambessa releasing on the 7th of November, so in about a week's time. Of course the release is synced up with the PC, being that it is arcane and all. So Ambessa, according to the leaks so far, has quite a number of changes from PC, but I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that on a separate occasion. Here we have a ton of events. So we have the battle challenge that has already begun as I'm recording this video. We have Ambessa event when she releases, and as well as an arcane event when Ambessa releases as well. So now into the champion changes. Now the name of the game for champion changes in this particular patch is AP and AD ratios. So they tend to increase a lot of these ratios. So first up we have MF. MF I think has been pretty much the weakest ADC in my opinion. So what they've done, they've lowered her mana cost for her Q, which is really good because Miss Fortune uses a lot of mana. They have changed her ratios. So here you can see they increase her AD ratio by 5% on her Q, which of course helps her more in the mid to late game but not so much in the early game. Same for bullet time. Now bullet time gets an extra 10% AD ratio and an additional 10% crit strike ratio. So now the most popular build on MF now is lethality all across the board. Will this change make crit better? Possibly, because if you guys remember, there was a time a couple of months ago where MF was pretty much the strongest ADC on the Chinese servers, which is the only server that we can actually see the stats on, and that's when they nerfed her AD ratio and her crit ratio on her ulti, and then she became really weak. So maybe this change will revert her back to her former glory, perhaps. We shall see. I definitely will be trying her out, maybe making a video on it, in time to come. So Veigar again. He's getting now, instead of 5 stacks, he's getting 7 stacks on champion takedown. He's getting extra 5% AP ratio on his Q, and he's also getting an extra 5% AP ratio on his W. So now the way I see it is that this doesn't really help him all that much because Veigar's main weakness is his early game, right? Giving him more AP ratio of course is a nice thing to have, but it doesn't help solve his early game issue. Of course he is a infinitely scaling champion, so he should be weak in the early game, but I don't think these changes are very impactful because either way he is going to be really strong in the mid to late game when he stacks up his passive anyway. Now Pantheon is getting a relatively huge buff. Firstly, his Q cooldown is going down by 1 second at all ranks. The damage dealt to champions lower than 35%. The AD ratio is going up by 15%, which is really huge, and he's now dealing more damage to monsters, so his clear is going to be faster. I think we'll be seeing a lot more of Pantheon in the jungle, especially maybe in lane as well. I think this is a really huge buff to Pantheon. Galio is getting a pretty decent buff as well. Basically on all of his abilities, the cooldown is going down. Now his Q, his bread and butter, at max rank, which you max first, is going down by 3 seconds, which is a pretty huge buff. The Justice Punch, which is his E, is going down by 1 second at all ranks, and his ulti is going down by 10 seconds at all ranks. So overall, you're going to be able to rotate your spells more quickly. Now Galio hasn't really been very popular in any role, to be very honest, so maybe this will increase his popularity a little bit. I actually think he's in a decent spot, mostly as a counter pick, because Galio is generally used to counter melee magic damage assassins like Akali and Katarina, and just magic damage in general, so he shouldn't really be a blind pick. He's more of a counter pick, but I do think in the situations he's good in, he's just going to be even better. Now Swain is generally built as a tank, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase his damage. So on his Q, he's getting extra 5% AP ratio as well. Now recall that back when Swain first released, they did nerf the AP ratio over here on his Q, so now they're pretty much just giving him back some of the AP ratio. And his ulti is also getting a 5% AP ratio increase for damage per second, and health regen per second also 5% AP ratio. So as I said, you can see the trend in this patch, which is that they're increasing the AP and AD ratios generally by 5% and 10% at some locations, but generally by 5%. Lots of buffs all across the board. Now Swain, I think, is just a really weird champion with a really weird kit because you can't really build him full damage, and now he's just going to be so squishy, he can't drain tank anything. But if you build him like more tanky, he's just not going to do enough damage. So I always think Swain is in a pretty weird spot, unless you find yourself in a spot where you're incredibly fed and you can, get like one item over other people. Generally, Swain is just like a pretty meh champion in my opinion, but this should kind of help him, considerably. Now we move on to nerfs. So Gragas is the first champion getting nerfed. His body slam, which is the E, getting a 10% AP ratio decrease, as well as a 10 base damage decrease. Now that's a really sizable nerf. Now personally, I honestly don't see Gragas all that much. I can't remember the last time I've seen Gragas actually. He's really like unpopular. I've only seen him in the jungle like once or twice. Of course, those times that I did see him, he got really fed and he just one-shot me, but that's because he's really fed. So I really can't comment on how strong Gragas really is in the current meta, but it seems that he is doing really well because he's getting a pretty sizable nerf on his E and his ulti. The AP ratio also going down by 10%, so clearly he must be doing a bit too much damage. Now Heimerdinger, we all knew that this nerf was gonna come. He was so busted. I'm really surprised they didn't hotfix him because I really thought that he was really OP. The main thing I felt that was really OP about him is how hard it was to kill his turrets. Like, you need like 2 to 3 hits to kill his turrets as an ADC, which I think is reasonable because if you one-shot the turrets, they're just going to be really useless, right? But on the other hand, his turret damage is just too high. Like, when you go and kill the turrets, it kills you instead, right? So what they're doing, they're reducing the turret damage, the base damage by quite, not, I wouldn't say a sizable amount, but a decent amount at the higher ranks. The turret laser, which is the one that activates when you cast other abilities, the damage is also going down by a little bit. The rockets AP ratio remains the same, but base damage going down by 10. And the grenade, which is the stun, AP ratio remains the same, but the damage goes down a little bit at the earlier ranks. Now, do I think these changes make him weak? Definitely not. I think he's still going to be incredibly strong. Riot is using the normal approach they use where when there's an OP champion, they nerf them a little bit by a little bit. So I expect to see Heimerdinger nerfs in the next 2 patches as well, because that's generally what happens when they release an OP champion. They nerf it a little bit in the A patch, a little bit on the B patch, and a little bit on the C patch, and by the time we reach the D patch, they're probably going to be more or less balanced. So this is the normal approach that they use. So I believe in the A patch, he is still going to be really strong, and he probably is still going to get permaban. I don't think people are going to stop banning him because of this small nerf, although sometimes any nerf is enough to make people stop banning him, so he might slip through some of the drafts. So Mordekaiser is getting a nerf as well. I think he is in a pretty solid spot right now, so I do think this does make sense. His passive damage per second is getting reduced in terms of the damage growth per level and the base damage as well. So overall, just an AP ratio as well. So overall, just a pretty big combination of nerfs, right? Because you remove 0.25 here, you remove 0.25 per level, and you remove 5% AP ratio. It's pretty decent if you add everything up. So we'll do a little bit less damage. His cooldown on his, I believe this is W, is increasing by 1 second at all ranks. 1 second, not very big of a change. And the pull, which is his E, the cooldown is going up slightly at the earlier ranks, but at the later ranks it remains pretty much the same. So just make his early game a tad weaker. So now gameplay changes, we have quite a few. So first up, this is a really confusing change to me, because they are reverting the change. I say reverting because this used to be the old change. Used to be the old Mole Reminder in Servalda's Grudge, where you did automatically get 33% armor penetration immediately when you bought it. But what they realized is that a lot of people like to build Servalda's Grudge second. So especially like Kha'Zix, sometimes like MF, you would build Servalda's Grudge as a second item, and they thought it was too strong, which is why they added this scaling component, which is to pretty much force you to build it as a third or fourth item. So the fact that they're reverting the change probably means that they feel that that people are too tanky too early in the game, right? Like, you can fight someone like a Garen or a Mordekaiser, and they can already be unkillable pretty early on in the game as an ADC, for example. So they are pretty much reverting this change, I feel, because of that reason. So now you can actually opt to go for Mole Reminder or Servalda's Grudge early. Now I think Mole Reminder is a pretty terrible early item. Like, if you go for Mole Reminder second or first, that's a huge problem there, because it gives you only 25 AD and it's really weak. But Servalda's Grudge is actually a really strong like second item, like for certain champions, right? Not first item, but second item, it could be pretty solid after you get a 1 core item. So I think that the main like benefit that this gets is two. Firstly, for ADCs who want to build Mole Reminder as a third item instead of building IE against very like tanky compositions, that will benefit you a lot. Number two, for assassins like Kha'Zix who want to build Servalda's Grudge as a second item, that is going to be a pretty huge buff as well. So Next up, on-hit items are getting nerfed. So Terminus is getting a 5 AD nerf, and this is pretty sizable because Terminus is a very popular first item for a lot of on-hit champions like, you know, Varus, Ashe, Kaisa, etc. They all like to go for Terminus first. So losing 5 damage for pretty much like not the whole game, but let's say you buy Terminus at like 5 minutes, right? So 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and pretty much for the rest of the game, you have 5 less AD. It is going to add up in terms of your scalings and your abilities and stuff, and that is gonna hurt. So Wit's End is also getting similar treatment. I actually think Wit's End is a really strong item, just that it's the least like needed item out of all the on-hit items, right? Terminus is so OP, Blade is really strong, and Runan's just to attack 3 people really good. So a lot of times people don't even build Wit's End because they want to go for other items after that. But for the people who go Wit's End, you're getting 5 less magic resist, and this is the part that probably hurts more, which is your on-hit damage. At the start is the same, but at the end, instead of 80, it's 65. So that's like a 15 damage loss per auto attack. And if you're building on hit, you're auto attacking a lot. So every auto attack you do 15 less damage, which is gonna add up really quickly. Like in a single team fight, you could be losing hundreds of damage just based on how much you auto attack. So it is a sizable nerf, but I still think Wit's End will be built in the situations where it needs to be built, which is mainly when there's a lot of magic resist. And I think this might also be targeted at champions like Yasuo, for example, who like to go for Wit's End first item for some reason. So maybe it's because of that as well. Now, onto system changes. Now this change is a little bit confusing because I didn't understand it at first, so I'm going to try to break it down for you guys. Basically, this is the dragon attacking you, and this is you attacking other people when you got the Elder Dragon buff, which I couldn't understand. I was like, this doesn't make sense because it doesn't add up. So basically, the first part is, when the dragon is attacking you, and if it's attacking only one person, it does 80% damage instead of 100% damage. And when it does the lightning attack, instead of doing 50% damage to the other targets, it's going to do 30%. So overall, the dragon is going to do less damage because it does a little bit too much damage right now when you're taking the dragon. So now when you get the dragon buff, the chain lightning that ricochets is going to double in damage. So instead of dealing 100 true damage to other targets, it's going to deal 200 true damage to other targets. Now, I don't know why. Apparently, they think the Elder Dragon buff is too weak, so they're increasing the damage. But if you hit only one target, then instead of dealing bonus 100% damage, you're only going to deal bonus 30% true damage. So in terms of single target damage, it's doing way too much damage. So they're reducing that, and they're increasing the lightning damage against like multiple people. So I guess that kind of balances out a little bit. So mimics are getting a change. Now instead of having to collect them from the turret, everybody's automatically gonna get 3 mimics, but the dual lane players get 2 each only. So that's I don't know. So in dual lane, you kind of need to coordinate with your support to use them on the tower together, whereas other lanes you just automatically get it and you can just do it instantly. Now I think this is overall a good change because I think that sometimes the fact you have to walk back to like get the mimics is really annoying. Like I have a lot of times where, let's say I kill the enemy lane, I want to take tower plates, right? So I can either walk forward and get tower plates, or I have to walk back, get the mimics, and then let the mimics take the tower plates, and that wastes way too much time. So I think this is overall a good change. I think picking up the mimics was just a waste of time anyway, so I think this is pretty good. Now the deceleration way, which is that laser now damages monsters, because if junglers get it, they pretty much have like really little use for it unless they gank instantly, so that makes sense. Galio's Aegis is now back, because remember it is a trial and the trial period expired, and now it's back again. And we're getting a bunch of new skins, as you guys can see. Here is the Battle Anima skin, so 6 new skins coming up. I believe Ambessa should be getting a skin as well. I think she probably will have a release skin. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for the patch. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.